Hello everybody out there in Illinois Realtor world. I'm Betsy Urbance and just taking a break from the road. We've been on the road a lot of times. We've got a few more left to go, but I thought I'd visit with you a little bit about some of the questions that we're getting from our live audience, just in case you've missed us on the road and in case you want to show up at the next two sessions that are coming up here in July. So, on our way forward, we've gotten some commonly asked questions, and so we're going to record them here just in case they're on the top of your mind as well. All right, first, everyone wants to know about forms. What about forms? Will there be forms? Can we use the forms we have now? What will new forms look like? Let's talk a little bit about that. Number one, right this minute, before August 17th, the forms you have now are usable. Secondly, sometime before August 17th, you'll be seeing probably a lot of revised forms. You'll see them everywhere. You'll see them at your local association. You'll probably see them within your own office. You will see them from the Illinois Realtors Association. You probably won't see them from NAR, but you will see some guidance from NAR. Typically, NAR does not provide forms, but your state and your locals do, and I bet you your franchise will have some, your companies will have some. But the common denominator in all of these forms will be changes, and the changes will be in the blanks. You will have options of what ways you choose to provide brokerage services. Are you going to be a menu type company? Are you full service? Are you any number of ways? The company gets to make its own business decisions as to how the company will operate. Within that context, the company, not your franchise, but your company, will make decisions and policies about what forms you're going to use, what practices you're going to follow, and how you're going to price your services. Everybody has to make independent business decisions on how to price their services. I feel a little like I'm talking to the choir here because we know that more than anyone, but we've got to tell the mainstream media and all those forces out there that are under some misconception that there is some sort of standard practice or pricing. Having said that, here's some thoughts on the forms as they become available. And I'll speak just with regard to Illinois Realtors forms, and you can talk to your managing brokers in your offices about it. My thought is, when there's a choice, have check boxes. When there's a price, keep those spaces blank. Keep them blank until you have negotiated with your own client as to what that price will be. Now granted, you'll know what your office policy is, you'll know if there's a range in which you need to operate, but to save that space till you're having that meeting with your client and you all decide and negotiate together on what that space will be completed with, what amount will be in that, and it has to be a discernible amount, one you can figure out. Not if you're on the buyer side, hey, buyer broker will take whatever the seller offers to pay or whatever the listing broker offers to pay. That ain't gonna work. You need to complete that form when you're negotiating with your client. When will those forms be available? That's an excellent question. Very soon, before August 17th, and at least with regard to Illinois Realtors forms, at least a month before that August 17th date. Okay, another question we've been getting a lot is the MLS, surrounding the MLS offers of compensation. One of the practice changes that was agreed to in the settlement was that there would be no more on MLS offers of compensation. What NAR did negotiate really strenuously for, though, was off MLS offers of compensation to continue to be allowed. So there can be negotiation between listing brokers and buyer brokers, assuming the seller authorizes the listing broker to offer compensation to a buyer broker. That has to be part of the equation. Seller authorizes listing broker to offer compensation to buyer broker. That can happen, has to be off MLS. How do we do that? I'll tell you first and foremost, we don't do it by creating a new and different MLS. We've heard all sorts of workarounds about how there's going to be an app or how there will be a website or something that's created by who knows who creates this that aggregates co-op offers or offers of compensation of multiple listing brokerages. I promise you, plaintiffs' attorneys will be looking at that situation. So let's get to what we can do. Seller authorizes listing broker to offer buyer brokerage compensation. Listing brokers can do that with regard to their own listings. So let's just say, for example, listing broker has a website. The IDX feed is okay. You can have the IDX feed, which is an aggregation of all the active listings in your MLS. And you also can, if you are authorized by your particular seller on particular listings to offer compensation to buyer brokers, you can put that somewhere on that website relative to the listings that belong to your own brokerage company. All right, here's another question we're getting across the board everywhere we go. How are the ways that the buyer broker can get paid? Well, there are several ways. Number one, the most obvious, the buyer can pay the buyer broker directly, pursuant to the terms of an agreement between the buyer and the buyer broker. As you're well aware by now, the new practice changes will require some form of buyer representation agreement in writing with buyer clients. So that's the place to put the amount, however the parties figure out what that amount will be between the buyer and the buyer broker. So that can happen. Secondly, listing broker can continue to make off MLS offers of compensation to the buyer brokerage. So that's listing broker to buyer broker. Off MLS, listing broker has been previously authorized by the seller client to make that offer. Another way is for a seller to agree to pay a buyer broker or the buyer brokerage company directly. Obviously, that's going to take some communication between the seller to listing broker to buyer broker, and work that out. Everybody is going to know what's going on, and that'll be an agreement. You'll probably see addendums to contracts, or addenda, I like to use that term more, Latin derivative. That can happen from seller to buyer brokerage through that purchase contract. Yet another way, and frankly, this is one that as a lawyer I really kind of like. I like all the transparency and I like the way it works. And what it is the seller agreeing to pay, per the terms of the purchase contract, the buyer. And what they're doing is seller is offering a certain amount in concession to pay buyer to cover the buyer's costs. One of the buyer's costs is the buyer brokerage fee. So here's how it happens. The buyer broker consults with buyer about making that part of their offer. So they're putting together a really good offer, and when they submit that offer, it's going to contain an amount that they're asking for the seller to pay in concessions. It could include not just buyer brokerage fee, but other things, repairs, what have you. So that is another option, another way to do it, and frankly, the most transparent way, in my opinion. Also, one of the questions that we get, along with the fact that most everybody knows the NAR practice changes will require buyer representation agreements, well, along those lines, Illinois Realtors has advocated for the last year and through the last session of the General Assembly to require written agreements of some sort with every client that any broker has with a brokerage client. That will become law, assuming Governor Pritzker signs that legislation, on January 1, 2025. What this means is there will be some sort of written agreement, can be non-exclusive, can be exclusive, in any kind of brokerage you're doing. Residential sales brokerage, commercial brokerage, property management, leasing. Anytime you're working with a client on either side of the transaction, there will be some minimal written agreement required. So this will apply to all real estate licensees throughout the state of Illinois.